quite honestly, the subject matter for tonight and the speaker is what attracted you here. Normally at this point, I spend a little while introducing the speaker, saying something about his or her background, and why he or she is qualified to talk about the subject, and then a little bit about what we're going to talk about. Tonight is slightly different, of course. I think probably everyone in the room knows Pavel Satny, tonight's speaker, and he, of course, is not just the speaker, he's also the subject. So I'm not left with a great deal to say without trampling on what he's going to talk about. All I can say in brief summary is he's going to tell you about his unusual life and his being born and brought up in Prague, and the effect that the Russian invasion of Prague had on his life and how that changed everything. And as you all know, he finished up eventually coming to Aviemore. But he's going to sketch in a great more detail onto that story, and I know you're going to find it very interesting. So, Pavel's happening.
The only problem is you don't have the remote control. For the pictures, do we have the remote control?
Is it there? I thought you had it. It's disappeared. Anyone seen the picture? You went that way, but you had it.
That's a good start, isn't it? Okay. No? Who's sitting on it? I was going to say thank you very much, Chris, for the introduction. I know where it was. In the office.
It was in the office.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So thank you very much, Chris, for the introduction. He forgot to say that I'm the most terrified speaker you ever had. It's really scary because there are about 150 people in the audience. That's 300 eyes staring at me. It's very, very scary. But if I make any mistake, please excuse me, but I'm really nervous. I'll start. I was born in Prague, and I grew up in Prague, and this is the city. I was going to ask you, this will be a different format tonight, because I would like you to ask questions when you are seated like this, interrupt, heckle, but don't leave it till the end, because you want to go home. Just depart. So, I can't see, but how many of you visited Prague? That's quite keen. So, I don't need to describe Prague. When I lived there, I really enjoyed it. I had a normal childhood. I studied, first of all, I did apprenticeship as a toolmaker, and I got a distinction, so I carried on with engineering. These are my parents. I love the picture the way it was taken in the old days. I never had time to compliment what a beautiful picture it was, the lighting and the setting, to my mum. You know, I would like to say, wow, what a lovely picture. But I missed my opportunity. And this is my brother with a fancy hairstyle. he was a year and a half older, and I was the Humpty Dumpty on the right-hand side. And when we grew up together, he's on the right-hand side, and when the girls practiced kissing on us, he always scored so much better. So this is my brother. I just really enjoyed doing everything in Prague. Suddenly Dubček arrived. Dubček introduced free press, which was quite amazing after 20 years of communist regime. Also, he tried to introduce free market. He did everything which wasn't expected from communism. We call it a communism with a human face. He was my hero, of course. He was so popular. You can't see any security there. So I was a student. On holidays we just went to work, cheap labor, and my job was a medic at hop picking. And it was 21st of August 1968 when I packed. I was so excited going for this trip because I had no training as a medic, no first aid, nothing, but I had plasters in my bag and all the girls needed a blister. And so I was quite popular and I really thought, what a fantastic time to spend this guy on the left. Just about 6 o'clock in the morning, he knocked on the door and he said, Paul, or Pavel, the Russian invaded us. And it was so incredible. It's like thinking that when you wake up in the morning, there will be Russian tanks outside the village hall. Oh, not Russian, English, because of Alexander. I speak for independence, so Scots like the Gaddafi. You know, there are reasons for the English to come. It's so unreal, isn't it? It was just as unreal for me when the Russians arrived. So up from Wenceslas Square, there is a street which has got a radio, Czech radio. You just run. We arrived in that street, it's sort of sloping. We were at the bottom, and at the top, the Russian tanks and the soldiers were just arriving. And we were looking at each other, and what will happen next? And people started building barricades. When they were building barricades, I was not far from the lorry, and somebody released the brake, and it was just running down the street, and it crashed some people. Seeing dead bodies and the mayhem, it was so shocking for a student who never experienced a shot from the gun. I don't know whether you are experts in machine guns, but the sound of machine gun, the blood and the misery of it, it was pretty daunting. This was just scenes which you didn't want to see when you were going on a picking holiday. At one stage, I tried to climb on a lorry full of soldiers, and we all sort of started, everybody was trying to speak to the Russian soldiers, and I said, "Извините, пожалуйста, вы как фашисты," which means you are like Nazis. And the guy started pulling a gun and from the holster, and I was just staring at him, and luckily enough the other guys jumped on him and hold him down. But I thought, I'm chancing it. Then there was a lorry explosion. It was full of ammunition, and my friend who got me out of bed, he got a shrapnel in his arm. This is Wenceslas Square. The street suddenly was full of tanks. They were shooting against that beautiful building. Perhaps they thought it was the radio, but people were lying on the street, just covering their heads. And you can see how many people surrounded these tanks, and the soldiers just, they didn't know where they were. You know, I'm telling my story, but I've got a short film which is 6 minutes, and it will be much more illustrating what I'm saying. Perhaps you can say I'm exaggerating, but this film is very old now. It told the story.
As the tanks closed in on the radio headquarters, the broadcasters, as a last free gesture, played their country's national anthem. Czechoslovak national anthem, almost blotted out at times by the sound of Russian machine guns. The first battle of the morning was for the radio station. At 7:15, the Soviet troops made a dash through the streets to capture it. Inside the radio station, the broadcasters were already at their posts, and they refused to be dislodged.
You are listening to the legal free radio station Hradec Králové, Czechoslovakia. We appeal to all radio stations in Romania, Yugoslavia. Please inform about the situation in the Czechoslovak Socialist Republic. Please transmit all calls in Romanian, Polish, German, Hungarian, Bulgarian, French, English, Italian. Please let the whole world know the truth.
The people of Prague had got there first. The area was blocked by abandoned buses and trams, serving as impromptu barricades. The battle raged all morning, if it can be called a battle when only one side did the fighting. The Russians' failure to secure the radio station at once was the only serious lapse in what was otherwise a remarkable piece of military planning. Within hours, the city was in the total grip of the invaders. They took over everything, every government building, every factory, almost every street corner. Not to administer the country, but simply to crush out any opposition in it. The government, which had already ordered the Czechoslovak army to remain in barracks, also appealed to the people not to fight back. For the most part, the call was heeded. The dead were treated like martyrs. Praguers found the soldiers knew almost nothing of where they were or what they were doing. Many of them were shaken by their confrontations with ordinary people, people who had an historical affection for Russians and who weren't afraid to argue with them about what they were doing.
I have been spoken with many Russian soldiers. The first day was really very interesting. You could see all people standing around the tanks and try to explain to these young boys, to these soldiers, that nobody wants them here in Czechoslovakia, that we were happy in this situation in our republic, that we were free, we felt freedom, but they said that there was a counter-revolution and you can't explain them anything.
Would it have ended any differently if they'd met force with force? Hungarians, Poles and East Germans all took on the Russians over the past 30 years, but they're still just as much in the Soviet camp as ever. In Czechoslovakia, the people didn't think there was a need to fight. They thought that because political freedom had taken root, nothing could stop it growing. That the appeal to reason and decency was the only defense they needed.
You say them why you came. You must see that there is no counter-revolution, that nobody wants you, that nobody needs your help. No, I'm your friend, I'm the brother, and I came to make freedom, I came to make order in your country. And we said that the brothers and the friends couldn't come on tanks, but they don't understand.
You're nervous and unemotional. How did you get? We came home with my friend and we thought, how can we make a revolution? But these tanks and so many soldiers. And we thought in Cuba, they had all beards and they had the revolution in Cuba. Being crazy as we are, we started making posters overnight saying, don't shave until the Russians go. And hanging these posters. It was near my school. I was hanging the poster up and they shot right above my head and the masonry was falling on me. And I thought, Floyd, another close shave. I went home. I was really scared. 40,000 people left the country after the invasion. I started thinking, perhaps I could leave as well. There was one more protest in Prague. It hasn't happened in Europe. I don't know whether it's recalled in the history that somebody would make a human torch for the beliefs. And his name was Jan Palach. He was 2 months younger than me, and he died for the cause. It took 20 years before he was recognized and named a square after him in Prague. But it was because of Pavel, who came to power in 1989, the World Revolution. There was a massive funeral for Jan Palach. It was such a sad day. Everything was quiet. Schools closed down and people just went to his funeral. This is the square, which is named after Jan Palach. It's just beside the faculty he studied, the philosophical faculty, and the building in front of me is the concert hall where we have famous presentations. Václav Pavel, he is another story really. I have to stick with 1968, the Velvet Revolution, and it was called Velvet Revolution because nobody died. There was no casualty, the communism died really. He was sort of another Alexander Dubček. I started thinking, okay, I will leave Czechoslovakia, and I started sending letters to a Russian lady. She was a white Russian lady called Vera Trail, and I couldn't speak any English. What I did, I took the dictionary, English dictionary, and picked up words by words and started writing the way you tried. You sent me a letter in Czech using just words from the dictionary. It's crazy. And I noticed when I was reading this, you see, I shall not molestation you. She was a 75-year-old lady. What did she think of me when I wrote this? But it worked. I managed to get a visa. And you wouldn't believe the queues when people had to come to Prague from all over Czechoslovakia. We queued overnight on pavements, and I needed French and German visa, transit visa, because I was hitchhiking out of Czechoslovakia. Got everything organized. My mom baked me these cakes, which are called buchta. And I packed sleeping bag, shorts. I had 4 pounds with me, or perhaps it was even less. I just had hardly any money because you couldn't get Western currencies. I started hitching. I hitched with this, not this hat. I wish I had the original hat, but it was like Easter bonnet. So, and I had this board which I still keep. And it says Czechoslovakia in French and English. And off we go out of Prague. I was moving really fast because people just felt sorry for me, perhaps seeing me like that. I hitched to Germany, got a lift with the American soldiers. They spoke English, of course. Couldn't understand the word. So I got to France, and I got a lift with some young boys. All the way through France, we drove a place called La Touquet, which is south of Calais. They finished all my cakes. I arrived in this resort, and first time in my life I saw the sea. It was awesome, looking at the infinity, and I was just sitting there and taking it in, thinking what's on the other side, what kind of future. Arrival to Britain. This is much later, but when I came, I could only communicate in Russian with this Russian lady. Started working in Italian restaurants, argued for jobs like they do in London in those days. Made gradual progress, but I had to walk all the way from Putney to Piccadilly to my language school because I had no money for bus, and even cakes. When I was choosing cakes, I remember, shall I take raisins, which cost half a penny in those days extra, and sometimes I splashed out on these cakes with raisins, but I had no money. And gradually I saved money and got myself this Skoda car. And it was the real McCoy. As they used to say that you put petrol, you double the value of the car. I played tennis with a Spanish professor, and because I beat him, he said, I'll give you a Spanish holiday. So I thought, great. So I hitchhiked out of London again to Hamburg, down to Brussels, Paris, Aviemore, and I came to San Sebastian, and I was heading for Santander. And they said, you've got a Czech passport, you have to go to Barcelona, over these amazing hills. And I really enjoyed hitching. I would encourage you to do it, but perhaps you missed your chance nowadays. It was so much fun. And I arrived in Barcelona, and I saw this fantastic building called Sagrada Familia Church, which is still unfinished. It came 30 years later, and it was so different. Anyway, from Barcelona, I traveled a place called Pamplona. I arrived there. There were a French group of people, and when I said I'm from Prague, we drank and they cried, and it was good fun. We slept in the park, and when we woke up in the morning, they had these crazy bulls running around. I didn't know it, it just happened. It was so spontaneous. I was given this holiday, then I slept on beaches in San Sebastian, and eventually I arrived in this place. I couldn't believe it, what the professor gave me. I saw the views, and after sleeping in parks and beaches, the food was fantastic. Thank you very much. I had a lovely holiday. I came back to London, and everything burned down. I lost everything because the Russian lady managed to burn her house down. But luckily enough, I had a job in Horsham. So I moved down to Horsham and got a job with a Swiss factory, and we had parties, and this was a party which Monica, my wife, attended. It's the first time ever we met. She's the lovely girl down here with blonde hair and with a skirt. She was stunning. And have you got a picture from the first time you met your wife? I just treasure this photograph. After a few months, when you have to work with artificial light, noise, smell, and mainly the 8 hours people work in the factory, intention to leave and start something different. But before I left the factory, I had this crazy idea to start taking photographs, and you will not believe it. I designed a business card. I had no camera. I had I had no knowledge how to process pictures. I had my business card. Then I got myself this Praktika, which was the cheapest camera on the market, on the par with my Skoda car, real rubbish camera. But I managed to take a few photographs, and this was my first photograph which I sold. It's so exciting selling your photograph, but that was the only one I think I sold. I won the battle but lost the war. I was thinking about going to Scotland as a ski instructor. Again, I skied a little bit, but I had no knowledge of skiing. But before I go any further, I've got a little test for you. Chris, can you put the lights on, please? You must all participate. It's a personality test. Am I pressing the buttons again? Help, 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 Chris. Smooth and professional and very well. Yeah, right at the end, aren't we? Oh. So this test is got 4 different shapes, okay? And you have to pick up one shape and stick with it. You're not going to change it as we go along. Can you see those 4 shapes? That's the ones. So take it in, take up the shape you like, and those people, there are a few friends, I tested them with this very scientific test, and they had to stick with the, it was only small groups. This is going to be very accurate because of the large audience, okay? So, who picked up this triangle? Hands up. 4! This is fantastic because this is for very ambitious people. You want to achieve something in life. We've got a presentation with Sue Harper-Todd. She climbed the Everest. I bet she would put her hand up for this one. So, pretty good percentage there. Next one. Who got square? That's interesting. You know, this is sort of reliable people. You say sort of square, but it means if you are having some problems in life, some dilemmas, and you need advice, you need these people. Judges, you know, I shall swear. And this one. Who picked up this one? My God! This is very creative shape, isn't it? I think if you had Swiss connections, you would put your head or ambulance, or connotation with religion, and so on. That was majority, usually. It's only a few. And finally, who's got this one? Oh, there are a few people as well. Around holiday sunshine. This is scientifically proven. This group of people is completely obsessed with sex evolution. Sex and death. Okay, listen. I decided. I thought it would be but surprise. I know that this side of the room is quite popular with this shape. We share the room. My wife. Talking about sex. You know, an average sex lasts 40 minutes. But the question is, when do you start counting? Does it include 20 minutes of begging? I will not digress. I will go back to photography. Passed my car, the Ford Consul. It was a fantastic car with a front big bench, gears on the steering wheel. I just drove to Aviemore, leaving Monica behind, which wasn't easy. But it was such an important decision. Life is about making decisions, isn't it? And, I drove to Aviemore, and ice on my windscreen, and I came to Perth. I turned for A9. I finished in Stirling, so I had to go back. But eventually I arrived in Aviemore, and I slept in the ice ring for a couple of nights in the changing room. Got into the changing room. I was looking for jobs. I went to see Derek Brightman, who was in charge of the kids' sports ski school, and he said, sorry mate. So then I finished in a bar, working in the Stoker. This is Aviemore, as it used to be, so special, so unique. And it was like a big family in those days. And I got myself a job in a bar. I never drank because I was into sport and so on. And I got the job there, 3 pints, and it was great fun. And what was amazing, the boss on the right, with the long hair, remember his face? He was called, oops, that's the guy, Mike. Do you remember this picture? Everybody remembers it. So he was my boss. Claim to fame. And he inspired me to do my streaker. Yeah, okay, take a streaker, because in those days everybody was doing it. Oh. So I approached this guy, I approached some people, and they looked at me and I was crazy. But this guy said, oh yeah. And we couldn't find anybody reliable on top of the mountain to carry the clothes. So eventually we trusted somebody, and he skied all the way down. And this is a picture which I made postcards of. And it was selling like cakes. It was so popular in the shop. And I became a ski instructor. I loved the job, but I couldn't ski, so there was this, what was his name? Norbert. He was from Austria, and I stood just beside him, and what he did, I copied, and gradually I progressed. But this is my first week of improvising all the way, and this was the ski school. Look at the amount of instructors, and honestly, when we walked the streets in Aviemore, the red jacket was something special. It was, I was a ski instructor. But I started taking photographs as well at the same time. I took pictures of the classes and ran back to the bar, and I invited everybody to have a drink, and the manager was delighted that I was doing business for it, and I was selling pictures in the bar, gradually improving. This is Monica trying to Aviemore and join me. She left a nice comfortable home and a nice job. She was working for British Caledonian, and we lived in a caravan to start with, but we got married. And this is my wedding photograph, and he compared to my parents. Do you remember that picture of my mom? It's tricky, isn't it, being a professional photographer? I'm too critical perhaps, but this is the wedding photograph which we have. And this is Monica with short hair. Perhaps some of you know her, and hardly recognize her because she used to wear a miniskirt and she was great. Suddenly realized that the business was doing well, selling photographs, and I perhaps could do with a shop. And this was a little corner in it, and I managed to get this shop, which was just empty. There was nothing in it. I had no money. I had empty boxes displaying in the window, but it was so quick how the whole business was building up. And people started recognizing me. They started as a photographer. You know, I couldn't decide whether I was ski instructor or a photographer. And gradually I thought, yeah, I'll be a photographer. This is shop which was perhaps a year later. You can see the carpet down and pictures hanging from the ceiling and so on. And Stuart joined me. Stuart was such an important addition to my business because he was a qualified photographer from Glasgow. He did college building and printing. He got his diploma, and he got me the mischief. And together we worked as a team and built a business. I was at the same time when I was working, I was doing babysitting in my wife because she was working. So when my young daughter was needing entertainment, I sat her in the window. So people were passing. She was just saying hello to everybody. Yeah, one way to do it, babysitting. And I promoted the business as well. I just wanted to be remembered. And this is one of my crazy adverts. And the local minister came and told me off later. But we were operating in days when these cameras were selling as normal. It's a box with the glass. What you have nowadays, we are all digital out there. The camera has the sophistication in it. This was just a box and a glass. And that was our trade and my practica. And then a big decision again. The rent, I don't know, quadruple. We moved to the high street, right opposite Tesco. And business increased. We started with empty shop. We put middle up in, started employing more videos. I don't know how many of you know my shop, but it was growing, the processing was fast, and we started color as well, which was something new in those days. So this is team just increasing in numbers, as you can see, and people say, how do you sell photographs? How do you sort of manage to sell your photographs? And you know, it's so easy to take photographs. Everybody can do it. But to sell it, it's an art. And I've got a friend in the forest, and whatever his prices were, I was trying to match him. It was always ahead of me. In those days, you know, I saw a lorry crash, and at the bottom, can you see there's a little car squashed by all these barrels. It was pretty horrific. But I managed to pick up the telephone number from the lorry, wrote to the PR department, and I said, look, I've got this photograph for you, which perhaps will teach all your drivers to avoid accidents like this. And I charged £200 for the job and got away with it. Another accident. I carry cameras with me all the time. This was a taxi driver, Delpharo crossing in Aviemore, with a few accidents, but this was special. I processed the picture and ran to Inverness. It was published in most of the papers. Everybody took it on. And front page, half a page, daily record and so on. It was, I mean, if you carry cameras with you, you need to be lucky for a shot like that. And after that as well, do you know, the Sun, next day came to interview the driver from that car, and they had another 2 pages of story. But I showed this picture because perhaps a year later, it was stored in some picture library, and the check came from Canada for £700. You know, in those days it was a nice income. And I was building a house, and my bricklayers had no driving license, so and one day I was driving them home, and I said, there's a fire engine, chaps, do you mind if I follow it and see whether there's some accidents which I should photograph? And they said, oh, fantastic, yeah, go. So we just drove like maniacs behind this fire engine, through Can You See the High Street, you know, and I was really driven going, carrying on to Newton Mall, turned to Westeros, uphill there. It was my bricklayer's house on fire. It was incredible. Anyway, I didn't make any money. But I had 12 people working at one stage for Aviemore Photographic, and it was really, really enjoyable time. I loved what I was doing, and this is the finished sort of shop which had the old camera stuck in the corner. You know, Julie is here, who was running my shop, and sometimes people came to the shop and they said, it's like coming to heaven. You know, if you are into photography, they really enjoyed the way it was set up, and this sort of the layout. We did framing and everything, and we started internet and so on. I did videos. This is the shop which we had and enjoyed for so long. We started taking pictures of so many personalities. It was such a privilege to be involved with Ronald Reagan. I was with him for an hour, following him and snapping him with his wife. He was really an entertainer. an ambassador to his country. I'm going to tell you, I had a job about 10 o'clock in the morning, and they phoned me and they said, no, we have to change the timing, you have to come at 9 o'clock. And it was Stuart who was supposed to do the job. So I phoned Stuart, I need you at 9 o'clock in Inverness. And he said, hold on, I've got a dog to take for a walk, I haven't had class, I haven't had a breakfast. So I said, okay, you come when you can. I drove like a maniac to Inverness. Through the security, there was policemen, yellow jackets everywhere. I still didn't have a clue who was coming. And I sort of said, excuse me, what's needed? And she said, when Tony Blair comes, and Prime Minister Blair, and I thought, what am I doing here with my little Instamatic camera? And I looked out the window from that room, and there were 2 coaches full of photographers, BBC, all the guys with big lenses and so on. And I was locked inside this room with Tony Blair. And again, he said, you will need with the helmet, without the helmet. It was such an experience to photograph people like that. These are all the photographers locked in the enclosure there. It was a really good job. There should be Stuart somewhere locked as well. Photograph also Sir David Steele. He, I think, could have been the best Prime Minister who never was. He came to this conference. Opening line was, when I drive the car, I've got 3 cars on me. And if the police stops me and say, give us a breathalyzing test, I just give them the card and it says, don't take breath from this gentleman, he's an asthmatic. So the police says, you'll take your blood test. And again he puts another card in and says, don't take blood from this gentleman, he's hemophilia. And then they say, okay, we'll take a urine test. And he gave him the 3rd card and he says, don't take piss, I'm a leader of the Liberal Party. So, photographing Tony Steele, Sir David Steele was special as well. I got Stuart talking to him about his dog and so on. It was good fun. I photographed a lot of politicians, and it was Glenmore Lodge. A few people perhaps recognize that. Really much like Callahan came right to the top of the Kingear Mountain. This was in Brighton. I got involved with the conference there, and I photographed the clerk. Again, a fantastic experience. When I photographed him, his opening line as well was when he met Mandela. They didn't say anything. They just exchanged a glass of good Scottish malt whiskey, and it somehow made all the difference. And then they changed the whole South Africa. And so I was so proud to be Scottish. It's a beautiful experience photographing the clerk. And this picture is quite incredible because there is a wife beside him, and she was murdered 2 months later after this picture was taken. So this was actually you can name these guys: King Jordan, Young, Rifkin, and I got involved with royalty as well. I photographed most of the royalty apart from Dad. This was the Queen in the centre, and a long time ago. Everything was polished and painted for her. And again, I enjoyed it. Can you see Stuart in the background there? I photographed Princess Anne on so many occasions, and I was going to show you all the slides with different hairstyles and fashion and for the ladies. But Chris said, you are only allowed so many slides. So, Tom Conti. Do you recognize the guy with the glasses?
Yes.
They're in white. And the lady on the right? She's a famous opera singer. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, sorry. And these guys. Who knows this guy? Anybody? What? Spielberg, Bee Gees guy, and different hats, different occasions. Old Harry's. This is Bob Monkhouse. This is my wife. Chatting up. Is it going? This is if you show the name. I photographed a little bit 2 years ago in Aviemore. She was thank you. And Morrison chap, what's his name? Anyway, comedians. This chap, apparently, the only time he can get washed is going through the car wash. Are we okay? Yes. Oh, he forgot it. I'll go through this. So, Kendall, I'm showing you these pictures because I bet you didn't have a clue that these people were coming to Aviemore and entertaining crowds. Totally embarrassed. He just doesn't Mansell. Look at these faces. Golfers in the office here. Roosevelt. And this is Anthony Head in London. Pavel. And Jim Savile. And that's Jim Savile grabbing my girls. I was involved with building a chariot, and again, it was such a special job because they gave me this massive car and I was driving to the top of the mountain every so often. Do you remember days like that? Yes. Excellent. It was so special. So I don't need to say it's Traverse, going up the Traverse, Conica's is just on your right. I did helicopter shoot, and this is Snechta. We had so much good skiing when we went off-piste. Again, this is Karian, the beautician from Aviemore. I really had a good time taking photographs and being involved with not just taking photographs, but employing people, advertising, reading about cameras and promotions, and I never ever realized that I would be involved with PR. PR is dealing with gangsters, really. What happened? I went to Inverness to take a photograph of Dunning Park Hotel. It was Mrs. Nicol, and there are about 20 photographers in Inverness, and she always asked me to come and take photographs for her in Inverness. So I tried to impress her, and I put all my cameras in a case.
Did she give you one of her puddings, by the way?
She was
That was a special thing.
Photograph her hotel. I always take sort of extra cameras with me. I took everything that time. And started driving back to Aviemore, and I was going to go all the way to Glasgow because my daughter had her flat there and just finished decorating it, so I was going to photograph it for her. And I thought, shall I go to Aviemore? No, I'll just drive all the way to Glasgow. And I was going to tile the bathroom for her, and I was deciding whether I should buy 60 pence tile or 80 pence tile. It was such a major decision. And now on the speaker in the background, they were saying, a car was broken into, and the owner, and I and somebody tapped on my shoulder, excuse me, could be your car. What shall I do? So they called the police. And they dusted my car for fingerprints. They had grease on their hands. They just couldn't get any finger marks on the car. I started making posters there. The reward, I think it was £1,000 offered if you can give me a lead to find my cameras. And I went back to Glasgow and looked for people with tattoos and no teeth and scars. It was a Black Hill area. It was an amazing place because nobody wants to live in Black Hill. Back to the B&Q where I bought my ties for the 60 pence. And the guy who stole my camera, they knew, and his name was Pavel. So I drove around Black Hill and seeing people just leaning in these corners instead of being at work. And there were young boys kicking ball. So I said, excuse me, do you know coming? And they looked at me and just kind of walking away. And in the mirror of my car, I noticed they were laughing and smiling. So I thought, I'll be the lead. So I jumped out of the car and I said, look, this is no police, it's just me and you. I need to recover my cameras. Please help me. It was the brother of Kami. He was hitting the ball. I managed to meet Kami. He just opened the car. No, it was his mother. I was in the street there. And she said, leave my son alone, he's on probation and he hasn't done anything. And suddenly Kami came, pushed Mummy away, sat at the back of my car, and his minder, who was twice the size of me. Kami was about skinny and tiny guy, and he had this minder with him. They both sat in my car and just said, drive on. So I started driving and saying, chaps, I know how you live here. I know the situation you're in. It's desperate. And perhaps I would do the same. I really felt for these guys. And we had a little conversation in it. And Kami said, yeah, F, nice, C, T. So I thought, I'm in business. He likes me. I talked to Kami and he said, hey, you got 20 quid, and he went to this tall building. There are some sort of massive buildings. Came with the salt and drugs and so on. I've never seen that in my life. And I thought, this is some carry on. He said that the cameras were sold for £100. Okay, £15,000 of cameras or more were sold for £100. I couldn't believe it. And he said the guy who's got it is on holiday. So I drove back to Aviemore, was sitting there in my office and waiting, and meanwhile these characters from Glasgow were phoning me, the ones who got the posters, you know. Anyway, one guy phoned and he said, come down to Glasgow and I think we've got your cameras. Down to meet him, and again, we had teeth missing, tiny guy, mind beside him, and he started talking to me that he's got the cameras and I should sort of make some arrangements with him. And I thought it was not right, something was not right. So I went to see Kami, my friend Kami, good friend. And he said, where are they? So I said, Kami, just around the corner. He said, wait, have you got anything in your car? And I thought, is he asking for knives, guns? I thought, give me the biggest spanner you've got in your car. And he put it up his sleeve and ran after these guys. I was sitting there in the car thinking, what's going on? Can I sort of cope with this? He came back and he just said, they will not bother you anymore. Tiny guy challenging those two. You know, he was tough. I went back home. I thought, I will stick with Kami. And then I received a phone call. The cameras are available from Michael and Kami. Meanwhile, the girls were answering the telephone in the show. They were terrified because, you know, the glass vision from Black Hill area. Oh yeah, can you see down here? He had a Kami written out as a graffiti on the building. I just discovered by coincidence. Kami phoned and he said, come and collect your cameras in Glasgow. So I collected money and drove, it was 11 o'clock, it was late at night. I came to this park. There's a golf course not far. And I just, first of all, I took petrol and I was so scared. Taking the petrol, my hand was shaking, and I splashed petrol on me as well. And so I stank with petrol, and I came to this point where we were supposed to meet. And two guys came out of the darkness. They had hoods on and scarves up to their eyes. I said, hold on, I don't want to do this, two of you, just one. And the other guy went back, and he just kept his hand behind his jacket. And it was, again, intimidating. I gave the money, the cameras were exchanged, and what was was funny. He said, you should trust me, and I wasn't going to sort of run away with the cameras. And they started lifting the cameras, and I thought I was in gear. You know, I thought I was contemplating perhaps I will drive away without giving them money. Anyway, he grabbed the money, and I put my foot down on the accelerator, but I wasn't in gear. So the guys screamed, and they just walked away so casually, these guys, like if nothing happened. And I thought, they put money, I put my cameras, the deal was done. They polished them for finger marks. You wouldn't believe it. They were like brand new cameras. I came back to Aviemore, and it was 2 years later, we stopped using those cameras because digital cameras were coming in, and we started maybe taking them 35 mil. Amazing area, Black Hill. It's been all pulled down. There are no houses. It's a redevelopment area, and I wonder what happened to those people. You know, some had satellite dishes, and they were perhaps the drug dealers. And this is the area where I live now. This is my bedroom. And
can we have the lights on just for a second, please? Do you know this? Can you see perhaps I'll lift it up? Whoa. Do you know what this is, everybody? It's called Magic Lantern.
And Magic Lantern was invented before the film. When you started watching films and so on, oh, did I move it? So, I should learn. I should learn. So, I'm pretty close to it, yeah. But
There was a date, it was 1888.
when they advertised this slideshow, and Chris Carter is still doing it now. What a fantastic achievement that he keeps the tradition. And I think when Chris, he was telling me that someday he might give up, when he gives up, I think this will die with him. This special evening of slideshows and presentations which you have in Garten. I hope he doesn't give up so easily. Thank you very much, Chris, for showing me what to do, how to prepare myself. I would like to take this opportunity to also say big thank you to Stuart who kept me out of mischief, and his loyalty and his involvement in my shop was so important, because Aviemore Photographic wouldn't be the same without Stuart. So thank you very much. There was also Julie. Stuart worked for me for 30 years. I think it's incredible, the loyalty. And Julie, with 17 years, she was totally involved in my retail shop. She was reliable. She was irreplaceable. And both of these people were very, very important for my business and my survival. And finally, I said, it's so important to make decisions in life, and the most important and the best decision I've ever made was Monica. I think I will finish by quoting Andrew Marr. He said, it's a brilliant stroke of luck to have British passport. It's a brilliant stroke of luck to be British. And I would elaborate on it by saying, it's a brilliant stroke of luck to live in Scottish Highlands and be part of a small community like yours.
sure Pavel will be willing to answer any questions if you have any. I'll make one or two comments first of all. Did you notice who the commentator was on the DVD that he showed? John Simpson. So that's 40 years ago. And also there was a picture there of Fidel Castro when Pavel was talking about wanting some sort of revolution. Did you notice who had written the book? It was Garten. What a story. I bet you didn't realise that the proprietor of a photographic shop would be dealing with drug dealers and criminals in order to get his equipment back. That really is quite an amazing story, and I would imagine probably the highlight of all your adventures. Anyway, I won't go on any more just now, but if there are any questions you wish to ask Pavel, please do. Yes? Yes, sorry.
Pavel, going back to when you left Czechoslovakia, you made it sound like it was quite straightforward. I suppose we in the West have got this idea that it was very difficult for people from the East to leave.
Sorry, it's too late. You missed your chance. Yeah, it was totally different. I mean, when I was crossing the channel from Calais to Dover, I was on the train. I got a ticket I arranged in Prague, and I was sitting in the train, and the guy put his feet beside me on the seat beside me. And I thought, you'd be shot in Czechoslovakia for that. And I thought, that's what freedom is all about. This incredible, you have so much easy life that under the communists. They really kept a grip on you, and people were terrified. Even parents were terrified of the children, the way it progressed. It was horrific.
But you were able to leave by
I just picked up something from your. Would you repeat the question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Did you leave quite easily? We in the West have had this impression that basically if you're in Eastern Europe, it's very difficult to actually leave Eastern Europe. And you made it sound like it was.
I'm sorry, I didn't answer your question properly. After the invasion, there was a massive confusion, and the borders were sort of people didn't know which way to go. You see, they thought Dubček will survive; he will still keep the system going. So, hence the reason 40,000 people managed to escape. But then they shut the borders, and for 20 years it was bureaucracy at its best, and corruption, and I mean, if you were not communist, you couldn't do anything.
My hearing's not so good, you may have answered this during the lecture, but how many languages did you speak when you left home to travel?
Just a little bit of Russian and my Czech. I enjoyed that Spanish holiday so much that I started learning Spanish and I thought, I will love Spain and I want to go back. But I just ran uploads to Espanol, and that's about it. No, I didn't make too much of that.
Thank you.
Sorry.
What's happened to the rest of your family?
I should mention that in my talk. I've got daughter Lenka, who lives in Singapore, and she's going to Melbourne in December.
So it's a payback time in a way. My son is in Oman, and I've got Naomi, who is in Cambridge, and my little Sophie, who's 22 now, she is in Glasgow. So that's my family, and I had always a dog and a cat.
So what happened to your parents?
My parents, unfortunately, they died on me fairly early, so I lost all relatives apart from one cousin which I still.
And your brother?
My brother died at the age of 46. Pretty drastic, yeah.
But your parents came over.
Yeah, they visited me on a few occasions. Yeah. That was a treat. What was incredible, when I was leaving Prague, I was waving to my mum, and she said, "Paul, come back." And I said, "See, Mum, I won't be long." It took me 10 years before I could see my mum again. So that was not nice to my mum.
I was really following on from Tim, I think it was Tim's question. For how long after, when you escaped, was it fluid at the borders before they clamped down again, as everybody imagined they did quite rapidly? I mean, for how, was it months when it was that period of time?
I think I couldn't tell you exactly, but it became much more bureaucratic nobody could hitchhike in Czechoslovakia aside. I didn't follow exactly the restrictions and so on, but the communists came like a ton of bricks after the invasion. You know, they installed all the institutions with hard rock communists, and that they were replaced in 1989 is a miracle. I mean, it was a miracle for the whole Eastern Europe, really, when you think about it.
Are you talking about Czech communists or Russian communists?
Oh, it's the whole war at the same time.
Your route out from Czechoslovakia, was that through Austria, or did you have to follow through other Eastern Bloc countries?
Sorry,
your route from Czechoslovakia to the UK, was it through Austria, or did you go through other European?
No, I went straight to Germany. The fastest way to France.
Did you go through East Germany then? And did you have to
No, West Germany. I had transit visas for most
You managed
countries.
to get transit visas?
Yeah, but again, it's another story. I bribed people to get me through and to get jump the queues because I was in hiding, you know. So it was so complicated to get transit visas and so on. But once I had the British visa and a ticket over the channel, they were forthcoming. And but it was. I was a student. I had plenty of time. But for people who weren't and had to camp on the streets to get these visas that they were giving, it was pretty horrific. Yeah.
Any more questions? Well, if there are no more, then I'll draw these into a close and thank Pavel very much for his talk. I think you'll all agree it's a pretty amazing story. Story I imagine that very few people here have experienced the like of, and I think the way you've set it out and the funny stories that you illustrated it with, apart from all the wonderful pictures, was absolutely superb. And I think it became very clear to all of us sitting here watching you what an impact on you the Russian invasion of Prague and Czechoslovakia had as a whole. Obviously, it was emotionally an amazing experience for you to have to go through. And how that changed your life, and obviously changed the life of a lot of other Czechoslovak people at the time. And then I think your brass neck and your nerve in all the things that you did when you came to Britain in order to have an idea to do something, and how many of those things that you tried, and amazingly some of them came off. And you finished up where you did, and I think we'd probably agreed earlier on that most of the people in the audience here know you, and know you through your business in Aviemore, either through that or through skiing or through seeing you with a camera around your neck or whatever it was. So we've all come to know you well and to like you, and that's why I'm sure we've had so many people here tonight. So it's been a wonderful talk, a wonderful experience.
I just ask you to pick up my business card if you want anything. Any technical questions how to find out how to hitch through Europe, I'll answer these questions on my email. Okay?
Listen, Mr. Chancellor, now before you go, can I draw attention to two things? Yet again, there are some sheets on the table at the end for email addresses. If anyone has not left an email address, so that we've got you on our records and you would like information about and my wife and I and some friends made this journey in September of last year, travelling from Xi'an, the ancient capital of China, in the east of China, right across China, right across the Gobi Desert, around the Taklamakan Desert, through the Tian Shan Mountains, into Central Asia, what is now Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan, finishing up in the cities of Samarkand and Bukhara. It's a pretty amazing journey, so I hope as many of you as possible will be able to come on that occasion. We look forward to seeing you there. Thanks very much for coming.
I couldn't sleep on it. Somebody saw this picture, and I never shook hands with Tony Blair. Stu just put a head on somebody. Even said by digital photography.